just loves that Rochester stuff.
We're going to get started in 1 minute.
July 14th, 2020 meeting of the Monroe County Legislature will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer.
Here.
Mr. Alcoffer is present. Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Mr. Ansello is present. Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart is present. Mr. Baroff.
Here.
Mr. Baroff is present. Mr. Baines.
Here.
Mr. Baines is present. Boyce.
Here.
Boyce is present. Mr. Brew.
Here.
Mr. Brew is present. President Carbone.
Here.
President Carbone is present. Mr. Delehanty.
Here.
Mr. Delehanty is present. Mr. Florio. Mr. Dondorfer.
Here.
Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Felder.
Here.
Mr. Felder is present. Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell is present. Ms. Hassman.
Here.
Ms. Hassman is present. Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Hebert is present. Mr. Keofet Lacey.
Here.
Mr. Keofet Lacey is present. Ms. Lamar.
Here.
Ms. Lamar is present. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. Marionetti. Mr. Marionetti.
Here.
Mr. Marionetti is present. Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Mr. Morelli is present. Ms. Roman.
Here.
Ms. Roman is present. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Ms. Taylor is present. Mr. Terp. Mr. Terp.
Here.
Mr. Terp is present. Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Wilt.
Here.
Mr. Wilt is present. Mr. Udelson.
Here.
Mr. Udelson is present. Mr. Zale.
Here.
Mr. Zale is present. Mr. Florio. Mr. Florio. Mr. Wilcox.
Here.
Mr. Wilcox is present. And Mr. Florio.
Here, sorry, I keep losing my connection for.
Mr. Florio is present.
You lost it again. Okay, we'll now need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, which is extended through August 5th by Executive Order 202.48. You have a motion before you, which is moved by Legislator Brew and seconded by Legislator Zale. This is a non-debatable motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. I would like to introduce and welcome Senior Pastor Jim Fox of the Living Hope Assembly of God, who has been invited by Legislator Wilt to lead us in a moment of prayer. Pastor Fox.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a great privilege. Being from a small church out in Hamlin, New York, it just is, it's neat to be a part of this. Thank you guys for letting me be a part of it. Let's take a moment and I want to encourage you. What I know is the Bible teaches us to pray for you guys, and our church is constantly praying for those in government. It tells us in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, it says this: first of all, then I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those who are in high positions. That's you guys, that we may lead a peaceable and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. This is good, and it is pleasing in the sight of God our Savior, who desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. We're to be subject unto you guys, as it says in Romans 13:1, because you've been placed there by God. And we pray because we believe you have a purpose. Every single one of you legislators are important. You're significant. And it's important to me that when we're praying, we believe God's helping you make good and right decisions. So let's pray. Father, I pray that you will bless Monroe County legislation, every person that's a part of it, that you give them wisdom and knowledge. I pray you protect everybody, keep them safe, even during this time, Lord, with the COVID-19. Keep everyone safe, help us to be healthy, but help all of these folks, men and women alike, who have sacrificed their time, their energy to put into legislating laws on our behalf, that it will do just what your word says, Lord, to lead us in a peaceful and a quiet life and to be dignified, a godly and a dignified way. I pray, bless every person to hear from you and to be thoughtful towards one another, esteeming each other higher than themselves, and having a willingness to really pay attention to you, God, so that it'll help them make right and good decisions. And I just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor Fox. You'll be receiving a certificate from us through the mail.
Thank you. One more thing real quick. I noticed a whole bunch of you are on Zoom. I know it's because of you guys trying to be careful of COVID-19, but there's one advantage to Zoom. A bunch of you guys have shirts and ties and suit coat tops on, but you probably, I'm guessing that you have swimming trunks on underneath.
Not up here at the county office building. Again,
Probably not. Some of these guys at home
you.
probably are.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, please stand as Legislator Carla Boyce will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Legislator Boyce.
I pledge allegiance
To the
to the
flag
flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States of America
States of America,
and
to
to
the
the
republic
for
and
which it stands,
stand
one nation
the
nation,
nation,
under
God,
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 indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
liberty,
for all.
justice for all.
At this time, I ask you to remain standing without objection. We will take agenda item number 22 and 23 out of the regular agenda order. Agenda item number 22 is moved by Legislator Brew, seconded by Legislator Felder. Will the clerk please read the resolution in memoriam for Laura Slight, mother of Monroe County Legislator Linda Hasman.
Expressing regret of the Monroe County Legislature on the recent passing of Laura A. Slight, the mother of Monroe County Legislator Linda Hasman. Be it resolved that the Monroe County Legislature hereby expresses its deepest sympathy at the recent passing of Laura A. Slight, the mother of Linda Hasman, Monroe County Legislator for the 23rd District. And whereas Laura passed away on July 6, 2020 at the age of 78. Laura was born in Oswego, New York to William and Dorothy Berry. She was a lifelong member of the Oswego community and attended Oswego schools during her early life. Laura is remembered for appreciating all life had to offer. She enjoyed spending time with family, friends, and the outdoors. She was a frequent traveler who enjoyed camping and sightseeing. Laura loved vacationing in Disney World with her family and loved ones. And whereas Laura proudly embraced her Irish heritage and enjoyed celebrating her family's ancestry, she was also actively engaged in politics throughout her life, emphasizing to her children the importance of voting and involvement. A woman of faith, Laura was a longtime member of both St. John's and St. Mary's Church. Her presence in the community was noted and appreciated by many. And whereas Laura is survived by her husband of 60 years, Charles Slight, 4 children, Sally Pelkey, John Slight, Edward Slight, and Linda Hasman, her sister, Catherine Berry, 2 brothers, William Berry and James Berry, a brother-in-law, John Slight, and 9 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. She is remembered by those closest to her as a loving mother, grandmother, and friend to the community of Oswego. Be it further resolved that the clerk of the legislature is hereby requested to forward a copy of this resolution to the bereaved family. The resolution was adopted unanimously, with each legislator rising in his or her place for a moment of silence.
Agenda item number 23 is moved by Legislator Brew and seconded by Legislator Felder. Will the clerk please read the resolution in memoriam for New York State Assemblyman and former Monroe County Legislator David F. Gannon.
Expressing regret of the Monroe County Legislature on the recent passing of New York State Assemblyman
Lost audio.
Excuse me, Mr. President, we can't hear anything.
No sound.
Mr. President?
I just texted them for what it's worth.
Can anyone hear them?
Now we can hear you.
Can they hear? Can we hear them?
No, can't hear them.
No.
Okay.
No, but I was able to get through to Riley O'Brien, who has just told them supposedly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any lip readers?
Yeah, but now it's this fuzzy.
No. Yeah.
Obviously realize something's wrong.
Yep.
As they say in the service, at ease.
Yeah, that's right.
And smoke them if you got them.
Smoke them if you got them.
I just got a text from Riley back that they're working on a fix.
I think we can all agree that what we missed was very important and a man that we should remember in his family and our thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I would assume it should be reread.
I totally agree.
Yes.
He's going to try to hang Dr. Joe.
Well, at least I wasn't the only one having connection issues tonight.
Dr. Joe, if you can hear me, advise Jack to start from the beginning with Assemblyman Gant's proclamation, if you could, please.
I already texted him that info. Do they know to repeat the entire second proclamation? Do they know to repeat the entire second proclamation on David Gant?
Shall we take a recess, Leader Brew? Or would it be inappropriate?
It's my understanding that the clerk is almost done fixing the technical difficulties.
there's anyone on the county administration line, can you let us know if you can hear us okay?
Yeah, we're all set here. We're resending an email to everybody else who was on the original invite to let them know this is working now.
Okay, our apologies. We'll resume here in just a minute under,
There's anyone on the county administration line, can you let us know if you can hear us okay? Yeah.
Okay, could everybody please stand again? We're going to go over the memoriam for David Gant one more time.
agenda item number 23 is moved by Legislator Brew, seconded by Legislator Felder. Expressing regret of the Monroe County Legislature on the recent passing of David Gant, New York State Assemblyman and former Monroe County Legislator. Be it resolved that the Monroe County Legislature hereby expresses its deepest sympathy at the recent passing of David F. Gant, New York State Assemblyman and former Monroe County Legislator. Whereas David F. Gant was born in Opp, Alabama to Leanna Mae Gant, moving to Rochester at an early age, David showed a passion for civil rights and a commitment to service, following the example of his mother, who served as a community advocate until her death in 1982. David attended East High School, where he became a star athlete, earning a spot on the All-City basketball team. He continues his education at Roberts Wesleyan College, studying math and science. David served as an administrator at the Anthony L. Jordan Health Center, whose name was suggested by David. And whereas in 1973, David was elected to the Monroe County Legislature, serving the 22nd District for 9 years. During his tenure, Gant served as Assistant Majority Leader, Chairman of the Public Safety Committee, Vice Chairman of the Finance and Budget Committee, and as a ranking minority member of the Human Services Committee. David was elected to the New York State Assembly in 1982 as a representative for the 133rd District, which became the 137th District in 2012. He held that seat until his recent passing. And whereas after becoming the first Black Monroe County resident to be elected to state office, David advocated for civil rights and for the poor community in Rochester. He spent his 37 years in the state assembly writing legislation to improve safety, equality, and infrastructure in New York State. He is remembered for his efforts to create more affordable housing and health care services for the young and elderly. He also advocated on behalf of Black-owned businesses and worked to improve education in the city of Rochester. David is admired for his efforts to secure over $1 billion for the Rochester Schools Modernization Program. He also secured funding for a new Rochester Educational Opportunity Center in downtown Rochester. And whereas David passed away on July 1st, 2020 at the age of 78. He is survived by close friends and family, and he is remembered by those close to him as a devoted public servant, humanitarian, and leader in the Rochester community. Be it further resolved that the Clerk of the Legislature is hereby directed to forward a copy of this resolution to the bereaved family. This resolution was adopted unanimously, with each legislator rising in his or her place for a moment of silence.
Your copies of the journals of day 12, June 9th, 2020, and day 13, June 22nd, 2020, are available through Novus Agenda. Without exception, the journal will stand approved as submitted. This meeting has been closed to the public, and all legislators are participating via teleconference in accordance with Executive Order 202.1 and 202.48. In keeping with this legislature's tradition of openness, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube through the legislature's official channel. Everyone participating via video or teleconference will please mute their devices except to obtain the floor or cast a vote. If seeking to obtain the floor, please simply state your name and wait for me to call on you before proceeding with your question or statement. The clerk will read the full title of each resolution and referral to avoid any confusion as to which item is before the legislature. All votes will be held via voice vote unless a roll call is requested. Legislators, the referrals submitted to the legislature for the next committee cycle are available on Novus Agenda as well as online. The governor's executive order permitting remote meetings has been extended through August 5th. We will once again meet as a committee of the whole, which will be convened through a special meeting. Those meetings will take place on Thursday, July 30th at 5:30 p.m. We will hold public hearings on the proposed 2020-2021 MCC budget and additions to the Western Monroe County Agricultural District during the Committee of the Whole. There are no proclamations scheduled this evening. There are no formal committee reports scheduled for this evening. We will now hold a public forum. Mr. Clerk.
We have a number of individuals who submitted email comments to be read as part of the public forum. We'll announce the name, and each written statement will be limited to 2 minutes. First statement comes from Susan Pilon. At around 4:20 p.m. on June 13th, as I was attending a Black Lives Matter peaceful protest with my children, I saw a young woman get hit by a car that had gone through the crowd in the street directly in front of Love Nails. The car was red with a scratched up license plate, and a young wild male was driving. He revved his engine and proceeded through the crowd. I was standing under the stoplight on the corner of Main and South Ave. My children and I were facing Love Nails, looking at my older daughter and her roommate, Emma Mason, who was struck by the car. I saw Emma get hit on the side of her torso and leg, and I saw her go up in the air slightly and go across the hood of the car. The driver made no attempt to stop her to check on Emma. I'm a retired HCSD teacher, and there were other former colleagues near me who also witnessed the hit and run. We were all in disbelief. My children and I were so distraught that we had to leave the protest and call my husband to come pick us up. A bit later, I was in the drive-thru at McDonald's, and I saw, as I was waiting, I glanced over at Carbone's Pizza and was horrified to see the same red car parked in the lot. Next email comes from Craig D. Carson. I was present when Emma Mason was hit by a car in Hilton. While activists were discussing their demands, reading narratives and poems, a car came through the intersection. I heard the crowd react. When I turned around, I observed a car forcefully driving through a crowd of people. It was an act of violence for sure. There were too many people in the crowd to drive this fast safely. Additionally, the activists did not threaten any drivers. They were merely listening, holding signs, or saying the chants. Car assaults are a rising problem and deemed to be an act of domestic terrorism in some cases, according to USA Today. Please use all privilege you may have to send a message against acts of violence like this. Next email comes from Jake Allen. My name is Jake Allen. I am a graduate from 12 years in the Hilton Central School District, class of 2008. I've attended every Black Lives Matter protest that has taken place in Hilton so far. All of these protests can be described as nonviolent. All of them had families with small children in attendance, and all of them have been threatened with or actually subjected to violence from people that live in the town. At the first protest, a man stood at the end of his driveway at the top of the hill just outside the village, the house with the big Confederate flag, wearing combat gear and carrying an assault rifle in an obvious attempt to intimidate a silent vigil for the life of George Floyd. At the next protest, one person got out of their car and tried to start a fight with the protesters. Another drove by slowly while screaming at the protesters with a pistol on his dashboard. Another actually drove his car through the crowd, narrowly missing me and hitting a woman a few feet behind me. The police, as you know, let this person get off scot-free. At the last protest, not more than a block from the march's starting point, a man stood in his driveway carrying a baseball bat in an obvious attempt to menace a small crowd that included many families. He then walked up to me in the street and took a swipe at me. I captured this interaction on video. I moved into the city of Rochester within just a few weeks of graduating high school. These experiences have reminded me why I was so quick to leave this place. Where in many places racism is subtle and casual, here it is overt. The fact that a group of families cannot invoke their First Amendment rights to protest against racism without being threatened with violence should tell you everything you need to know about the climate that exists in this town. I participated in other First Amendment activities throughout my life, but I can say without hesitation that I have never felt less safe doing so than I did in Hilton, New York. The onus of keeping people safe while they exert their constitutional rights falls on the leaders of this community. The responsibility of ensuring that racist threats of violence do not go unchallenged falls on the leaders of this community. The task of rooting out the very real racism that exists within this community and its institutions, again, falls on the leaders of this community. We are calling on those who hold power in Hilton to do your jobs. The whole world is moving ahead at lightning speed. Don't let Hilton be left behind. Next email comes from Save Rochester. We never thought that injustice would pervade the minds of those charged to be leaders in our community. We once erroneously assumed that those in power, especially police, were unabashedly dedicated to preserve law and order. Unfortunately, we began to discover that no one is immune to corruption and vile intent. Not our mayor, not our judges, or police sheriff. Todd Baxter is not a judge, and he has no power to dismiss a felony hit and run. We stood a few feet from Emma when she was struck by a car. The driver had hate in his eyes as he plowed through the intersection full of peaceful protesters. Todd Baxter let this man go. His actions are the epitome of injustice and how corrupt our system has become. We need change, and we need it now. We need justice for Emma, and we need that today. If charges are not brought against the man who deliberately drove through the protest, then it'll be yet another clear signal that police should be defunded immediately. Next email is from Karen Schidler. Recently, I attended a BLM rally in Hilton, New York. The rally was well organized and was full of rich speakers and music to help educate the public about oppression that Black Americans face in our community. It was honest and thoughtful. I was touched that the speakers were willing to express their trauma and love for humanity so publicly. The rally proceeded like larger rallies I've attended down West Avenue with participants marching in the streets and drummers supporting the chants of Black Lives Matter. But in the absence of the Sheriff's Department, participants had to close the streets themselves. When we arrived at the intersection of West and South Ave, the protesters stopped, circled up, and continued with guest speakers. Participants were forced to block the intersection because the MCPD had still not arrived to protect and redirect traffic. I moved to the east side of the intersection and was helping to direct traffic with a few other participants. The speakers continued as children were in the center to wait their turn to also speak. I was fearful as many cars upon approaching the intersection were revving their engines, staring me down, yelling and threatening to keep driving. There was one car in particular that an older woman in a blue car with a handicap sign hanging from her mirror stared at me and even advanced a few inches toward me. She stared at me through her sunglasses, and despite my calls to back up and go a different way, she refused and continued to stare at me down. At some point, I heard a black truck on the south side of the intersection sound like it was barreling down the street. When I turned, I could see it had done the same thing as what just happened to me. It was standing right in front of some white protesters, revving its engine and refusing to back up. The truck eventually retreated, but did so by gunning his vehicle into reverse, almost hitting other cars. I was also made aware of a woman screaming on the west side of the intersection and saw a red car drive off. People were yelling to video the car. I realized that the car just hit a woman and drove off. None of this is in the police report. The facts of the protests are not accurate according to the MCPD and Sheriff Baxter. The intersection was left vulnerable for our rally until a participant was struck. The sheriff did not assist with closing the streets or intersections as was expected. The streets have been closed down long enough that the red car knew that he needed to back up. Next message is from Nia Walker. Hello, Monroe County Administration and staff. I'm writing to share my experience visiting the Monroe County building to take care of some business that the county provides services for. I, as a citizen of Monroe County, was very frustrated and upset to learn that our employees of the county building did not present great customer service. I visited the building to get a certificate of residency for a summer college course I am taking. When we arrived, the guards instructed us to go to the information desk in the county clerk's office, where we waited for quite a bit of time. We were told we were at the wrong place and were directed to the second and third floors with little specificity. The employees were not very aware of what was taking place in other areas of the building to direct us appropriately. Once we arrived at the second floor, someone who I was with stopped by the county communications office to receive a status of a FOIL request she had sent there by both email and USPS a couple weeks prior. According to law, FOIL requests are supposed to be acknowledged or responded to within 5 days, and this did not happen. Thus, the reason for our in-person inquiry. An employee there quickly helped us in process the request. Next, we went to the third floor to the county real estate office to receive the certificate of residency. When we first arrived at the door, the men at the door were sitting around chatting. Once the men noticed us after we knocked, one came to the door to assist us. He asked me when my classes start, and I told him to begin that same week. From there, he proceeded to tell us in an annoyed tone that these services should only be done via mail and that we should have sent them through the mail. We told him the county nor the school's website say that, and that we were told there should be a quick trip to the county office building. The employee acted like he was doing us a favor to process it instead of doing his job. Soon after, another young woman arrived who was also trying to receive her certificate of residency. He gave her the same lame speech, but also told him the county website instructed we can do this in person. After this, he reluctantly took our papers and processed them to give us our certificates. This was poor customer service as well as unfair. A friendly person would have congratulated students on their educational pursuits and done their job without an attitude. When I left, I did not feel good about the encounter. Next email comes from Sharice Murray. On June 13, 2020, I attended the Hilton Black Families Matter March and Rally. I was completely taken back at the community of Hilton and the type of violence that was displayed by my local neighbors. As I am a resident of the village and there was not ready for that type of hate expressed towards peaceful protesters. Protesters were threatened with vehicles as they counted down to go through the crowd, displaying guns, cursing at the peaceful protesters, and lastly, running over a protester without any reprimands from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. I read the June 14, 2020 press release from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office stating that a car, quote, brushed against a protester in Hilton, close quote, and that the, quote, protester was not injured, close quote, claiming the driver was confused. I witnessed the car first try to drive through the protesters. Someone screamed, "He's trying to hit us." I moved to where I could get a better look at the scene, and I was about 50 feet away with a few people blocking my view. I could see this red car at a complete stop as people are telling him to back up and go the alternative route, and then you see him bolt into the crowd. I ran to the other side of the street to see past protesters. He slowed down once more, the crowd, and then took off without a trace, fleeing the scene. I screamed, "Get his license plate," immediately after. I held a 10-year-old girl that I did not know, breaking all social distancing protocols to try to calm her down. She cried, "I thought I was going to die. He tried to kill me. He tried to kill me." I held her tighter and assured her that she was safe now and kept her close with my 4 children. I would soon find out that no matter how much evidence we had, this man would never be held accountable in any form due to the protection of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. In the article, quote, "I would be very careful in the middle of the street," close quote. Drivers have hit protesters 66 times since May 27th. By Grace Gouch, she states, Wheel said that by analyzing news coverage and court documents and patterns of behavior, such as when people allegedly yelled slurs at protesters or turned around for a second hit, he determined that at least 19 of the 59 civilian incidents were malicious and 4 were not. Whale said that he did not have enough information to classify the motives of the remaining 36 incidents. Next email comes from Mark Oyer. On Saturday, June 13, 2020, I attended a Black Lives Matter protest with my family in our village, Hilton, New York, where I witnessed a person drive their car into the people who had assembled at the Route 259 intersection of South Ave, East Ave, and Main Street. I was standing on the north side of the intersection facing south with a view of South Ave, Main Street to the west and East Ave. There were 50 or more people peacefully assembled at the intersection and in the crosswalks and sidewalks. I saw a red car stop by the crosswalk line on Main Street facing east. There were many people in and around the crosswalk across Main Street and the crosswalk across South Ave and on the corner speaking and holding signs in support of racial justice. From a stop position, the red car then accelerated into these people driving east and turning south. People were yelling at the driver to stop, but the driver continued, pushing numerous people out of the way with their car and partially driving onto the sidewalk. As the driver turned further south into more people, causing them to have to jump out of the way, the car hit a young woman on the front left driver's side of the car with so much force that she was slammed on the hood of the car and appeared to bounce off the car. It looked like she was knocked to the ground, and I feared that she had been pulled under the car. But at some point, I could not see the ground where she was because people had gathered to help. As the young woman was hit by the car, the driver continued to accelerate the car faster and proceeded to drive straight south on 259. The Sheriff's Department arrived shortly after to attend to the young woman and protect the assembled people from further aggressive drivers, of which there were several others. I'm concerned that the Sheriff's Department did not have the facts of this incident because the next day the Sheriff's Department issued a statement that they identified the person who drove their car into the people and hit the young woman, but the statement was inaccurate and did not represent the facts of the incident. For example, the statement from the Sheriff's Department said in part that a person was, quote, brushed up against by a passing motorist, close quote. That statement is completely inaccurate and totally misrepresents the actual events of the incident and that I witnessed as described above. I hope a full and thorough investigation will bring to light the evidence of what truly occurred, so that the person who accelerated their car into a group of people and forcibly hit at least one of them is brought to justice. Our next email is from Bethany Oyer. I was at a BLM rally in the village of Hilton, New York on June 13, 2020. The rally was from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. There were 50 or more protesters, including me, my husband, and children, and we marched on Main Street headed east. We were assembled in the main intersection at 259 in Main. During the protest, a young white male in a red Honda Prius accelerated at the peaceful protesters right into 20 or so people that were in the crosswalk areas where he turned right. He had been stopped about 10 or more feet from the protesters. Then he accelerated and his car bumped and plowed through people. I was at his driver's door yelling for him to stop. I could see his arms were straight and high on the steering wheel, and it looked like he was pushing hard. And his hands looked to be wrapped very tight on the steering wheel. His head was angled down with his eyes focused straight ahead, and he had a big smile on his face. We were scrambling to get out of the way because he started going faster. His original tight turn trajectory meant that he drove up onto the sidewalk. His car was facing the people there, and he started speeding up even more. People were having to run backward to avoid being run over and just to get to the side. A woman was directly in front of him, and he accelerated and hit her with enough force that her upper body slammed on the front of his car and with her arms extended. She caught herself on the hood by her hands and was trying to escape. She was running backward with her hands on the car and then managed to get out of his way on the driver's side. The young man sped away. Everyone seemed to be in shock, and I know that I was holding my breath because it looked as though the young woman might get seriously hurt. Another very aggressive man in a huge pickup truck was threatening to plow through us. I was about 4 feet from his driver's side door, and he kept making a motion where he would be yelling and then look like he was going to reach for something in the center console area while saying, "You'll be sorry." It was really crazy, and then he abruptly backed up pretty far, revved his engine, and put his hand out, counting 1, 2, and revving. And then I think the sheriff's deputies were starting to come, and he quickly left. There was another situation where a woman in her car bumped into protesters after sitting in stop position with sheriff's deputies right near the area, and the deputy just kindly redirected her. Our next email is from Emma Mason. My name is Emma Mason, and I am the victim of the hit-and-run incident that occurred during a BLM peaceful protest in Hilton, New York on June 13th. I heard commotion and panic coming from behind me, and when I noticed a car was pushing through our crowd of 75 to 100, including babies and children, was being attacked by a 19-year-old man on his way to work. As a child care provider myself, I ran in front of children who I saw were in the line of the car pathway to protect them. We urged the young man to stop his car. We had people directing traffic for various alternative routes. He did not stop. In fact, he sped up. All the other cars who came through town were able to get to their destinations via these alternative routes. This 19-year-old who claims, quote, confusion is simply a lie. You don't smirk when you hit people and call it confusion. Anyone knows not to drive through a crowd of people, and everyone knows that using their car as a weapon is not okay. While I may not have sustained incredible injury, I was bruised and sore for days, and the emotional toll has taken its toll on me, has been immense. Hitting a person in the street, failing to alert the police, failing to stay until police arrived is not cooperation. That is a privileged young man who thinks he can get away with a crime. It is not right to let this person go uncharged. He deserves to learn a lesson. He needs to know that it is absolutely not okay to hit a person with a car under any circumstances. Our next statement comes from Shauna Monaghan. I was standing in Main Street in the intersection facing McDonald's. I turned, hearing a car revving its engine, and saw a red car come around a white car in front of Love Nails. I moved over next to Emma and Robin to tell the driver there was nowhere to go. Other cars had been turning around, so I didn't expect him to keep going forward at first. I was barely a foot from his bumper with him approaching to me when it became apparent to me he wasn't stopping. He smirked as his car brushed past me, hitting Emma. I found myself spun around and saw her feet come off the ground as she rolled onto the front and out of sight. I saw her reappear on her feet, so I ran a little after the car to take the half-rubbed off license plate and 2 large stickers on the back window, one on each side. He had shaggy brown hair, was white with a ruddy complexion, and looked to be 19 to 22. He drove off towards McDonald's. Our next email comes from Robin Wilt. On June 13, 2020, I attended the Hilton Black Families Matter March and Rally. I was appalled at the violence that peaceful protesters encountered. Not only were protesters threatened with guns being brandished, but at least one protester was struck by a motor vehicle, which then fled the scene of the accident. It was with dismay that I read the June 14, 2020 press release from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office stating that a car, quote, brushed against a protester in Hilton, close quote, and that the, quote, protester was not injured, close quote. Both statements were inaccurate, and the Monroe County Sheriff's Office has not only failed to retract the misleading statements to set the public record straight, but the department then used those erroneous predeterminations to prejudice the subsequent investigation, which rationalized its initial unfounded claims. After reviewing video and photo evidence provided by my husband, Nicholas Wilt, Chief Investigator John Auber acknowledged on June 22, 2020, that the Monroe County Sheriff's Office initial statement to the press misrepresented the severity of the collision between the vehicle and the protester, which had resulted in injury to the protester, and belatedly generated an accident report reflecting that the driver was at fault for striking the protester. However, no citation was issued to the driver for striking the pedestrian, nor for leaving the scene of an accident and failing to report the collision to authorities. The Monroe County Sheriff's Office also failed to incorporate evidence of the driver's intent into its findings and inaccurately applied the vehicular code to assign responsibility to the protester in an attempt to diminish culpability of the driver in the accident. New York State Consolidated Laws Vehicle and Traffic Law, Section 602-A states that, quote, any person operating a motor vehicle who knowingly or having cause to know that personal injury may have been caused to another person due to an accident involving the motor vehicle operated by such person shall, before leaving the place where the said personal injury occurred, stop, exhibit his or her license and insurance identification card for such a vehicle when such card is required pursuant to Articles 6 and 8 of this chapter, and give his or her name, residence, including street and street number, insurance carrier, and insurance identification information, including but not limited to the number and effective dates of said individual's insurance policy and license number to the injured party if practical, and also to a police officer, or in the event that no police officer is in the vicinity of the place of said injury, then he or she shall report said incident as soon as physically able to the nearest police station or judicial officer. Our next statement comes from Robin Steenson. My name is Robin, and I'm writing to you because I was there on that day and witnessed the entire thing. During the peaceful protest on Saturday, June 13th, the protesters had occupied the intersection, and we were there for no more than 20 minutes to listen to speeches and stories about racism in our community. Most of the oncoming traffic simply turned around or waited patiently for our demonstration to end. This car, however, could not seem to wait a few minutes and drove directly into the crowd without any warning. The car came from Main Street and was turning right onto 259. Emma and I were standing in the crosswalk when it happened, and there was a large group of us in that corner. The car continued into the crowd without any regard for our safety and hit Emma directly. I was standing beside her and I was bumped by the car, but I managed to get out of the way before it could do any damage. The car then drove off down 259. I stopped once to check and make sure that we were okay. The car then drove off 259, not stopping once to check and make sure that we were okay. The driver had no regard for our safety. A crowd of families with children and babies who had gathered peacefully to protest racism and injustice in our community. The driver was not cooperative with police and had disappeared before the cops and ambulance arrived. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. However, this could have been much worse. And I would expect the community leaders to care enough about the citizens living here that they would want to do everything they can to allow for peaceful protests without the risk of serious bodily harm. Please feel free to contact me for more information, and thank you for taking the time to look into this incident seriously. It's pathetic how many people in Parma and Hilton are willing to hurt innocent and peaceful protesters just because they're impatient. It's inexcusable. Our next email comes from Mary Ann Lana. Members of our family attended 2 peaceful protests in Hilton to support the Black Lives Matter movement. The Village of Hilton and MCSO were notified in advance of the June 13th protest. In spite of that, the protesters were not protected, and my daughter, Emma Mason, was hit by a car, the driver of which intentionally drove through the crowd. He was seen smirking and revving his engine. He then left the scene and was not charged. The report that Emma threw herself onto the car is categorically false. Emma was met with force by the bumper, propelling her onto the hood. The video evidence and multiple witness statements wholly refute the erroneous claims that it was intentional on Emma's part. The fault lies with the driver who drove through a crowd of protesters. At the protests on July 2nd, multiple sheriff vehicles and overhead drones were present. This was fortunate as we were confronted by several Hilton residents, one of whom carried a baseball bat. Another displayed the Confederate flag. A third attempted to drive through the protesters, but an officer stopped her. Leading up to this protest, my daughter had been told on social media not to invite outsiders here. On July 5, my husband and I accompanied Emma and protest organizer Sharice Marie to Sheriff Todd Baxter's home to discuss Emma's case. He did not answer the door. Sharice and Emma gave their statements to awaiting news cameras instead. My family has been harassed on social media since these three events have been, even having our address posted, police report filed on a Hilton Parma Neighborhood Watch Facebook page. And all this because we actively, vocally arbor racism and seek justice for my daughter. We are disgusted in the way that this case was handled by the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and demand justice for Emma Mason. Our next email is from Patricia Mason. A recent statement was released by the MCSO regarding the hit-and-run accident in Hilton, New York on June 13th, where a young woman, my granddaughter, was struck by a car and slightly injured. Emma was exercising her right to march in a BLM protest. A young man drove through the protest, hitting Emma. He sped away before police arrived and never reported it. There are parts of your statement I want to address for their inaccuracies. The first is that he fully cooperated with the investigation. Not quite. Emma found his car in town later that day and called the police, who then took a statement from him. You cooperated only after being caught. Secondly, the police kept using the term brushed up against. Even at a low rate of speed, he knocked her feet from under her, throwing her onto his hood before rolling off. This is more than brushed up. Almost buried in the statement, it is mentioned that witnesses stated she rolled off his car. The words brushed up seem to be used to minimize the severity of the hit. Isn't leaving the scene of an accident a chargeable offense, or does one need to be maimed or killed before being charged? She waved off the ambulances because she didn't think anything was broken, but she sustained much bruising and soreness. To say she wasn't injured isn't completely true. She did see a doctor later at the urging of family members. The young man complained of confusion because of the crowd. Police had been notified ahead and that there would be a protest, but didn't send any police, leaving members of the group to reroute people. Other people complied, but not this young man. Would he have taken this action if this were a parade? No charges sends a message to him that you can skirt the law, weaponize a vehicle, and there will be no consequences for your actions. This is wrong. There were eyewitnesses, but no video of her being hit. Since when are eyewitnesses not enough? One of her investigators said, quote, "At least you were not rioting at this time," close quote. She is not a professional protester, has never rioted, so what was that supposed to mean? Since the incident, she has received much hate online by anonymous, quote, patriots who don't know her and seem to be bent on bullying the reputation of a young woman who loves the community she grew up in and only wants to bring change peacefully. She is a credit to our community, a wonderful young woman, and I am proud to be her grandmother. I therefore ask that this case be reopened and that there can be justice for Emma. And this concludes the public forum.
This time we'll recess the July 14th, 2020 meeting of the Monroe County Legislature, and we will convene Northwest Quadrant Pure Waters District. Mr. Clerk, please read the first item on the agenda.
PWAB agenda item number 1, referral 20-0217.
Second.
Move it.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, second by Legislator Delehanty. With that, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
We'll go.
We'll now recess the Pure Waters Administration Board for the Northwest Quadrant Pure Waters District. The July 14th, 2020 meeting of the Legislature is reconvened. We will now proceed with the consideration of motions, resolutions, and notices. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda?
Item number 1, referral 20-0204, confirming appointment to 911 Operating Practices Board.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second, Mr.
Moved by
President.
Legislator Alcoff, seconded by Legislator Boyce. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 2, referral 20-0208, confirming reappointments to the Monroe County Recycling Advisory Committee.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Taylor, seconded by Legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 3, referral 20-0209. Authorizing additions to the Western Monroe County Agricultural District.
Move it, Mr.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Wilt. This is for introductory purposes only. Next item, please.
Item number 4, referral 20-0209, providing that resolution entitled authorizing additions to Western Monroe County Agricultural District be tabled.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Wilt. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 5, referral 20-0209, fixing a public hearing by the Committee of the Whole of the Monroe County Legislature on resolution entitled authorizing additions to the Western Monroe County Agricultural District.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 6, referral 20-0210, adopting 2021 to 2026 capital improvement program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Move it, Mr. President.
By
Mr.
Legislators
President.
Smith, seconded by Legislators Boyce, Terp, Wilt, Hebert, Alcoffer, Dorfman, and Delehanty. This is for introductory purposes only. Next item, please.
Item number 7, referral 20-0210, providing that resolution entitled adopting 2021 to 2026 capital improvement program be tabled.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by
Second.
Legislator Smith,
Second.
seconded by Legislator Boyce, Terp, Wilt, Hebert, Alcoffer, Dorfman, and Delehanty. And did I hear Legislator Baines also?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 8, referral 20-0210, fixing public hearing for adoption of 2021 to 2026 capital improvement program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Second.
Legislator Smith. Seconded by Legislators Boyce, Terp, Wilt, Hebert, Alcoffer, Dorfman, and Delehanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Item number 9, referral 20-0211, authorizing an amended and restated traffic signal easement and agreement with GM Components Holdings LLC to perform traffic signal operation and maintenance services for traffic signal number 535 located at the intersection of Lexington Avenue and GM Components Holdings in the city of Rochester.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next.
Item number 10, referral 20-0212, amending resolution 294 of 2017 to accept additional funding from New York State Department of Health and extending time period and authorizing contracts with ACM Medical Laboratory, Inc., DBA ACM Global Laboratories, and Reliance Staffing Systems, Inc., DBA Career Start for the Public Health Campaign Program.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion on this report? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 11, referral 20-0213, accepting grant from Health Research, Inc. for the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program and authorizing contract with the University of Rochester.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, this is Linda Hasman.
Go ahead, legislator Hasman.
Just wanted to declare my interest. I work for the University of Rochester Medical Center.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Item number 12, referral 20-0214, accepting grant from New York State Department of Health for Drinking Water Enhancement Program.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 13, referral 20-0215, authorizing contract with the University of Rochester for supportive forensics pathology fellowship program at Monroe County Office of the Medical Examiner.
So moved, Mr. President.
Moved
Second.
by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, this is Linda Hasman again.
Go ahead, legislator Hasman.
Just wanted to declare my interest. I work for the University of Rochester.
Thank you again. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 14, referral 20-0216, authorizing contract with Crane Hogan Structural Systems, Inc. for the construction services for Northwest Quadrant Water Resource Recovery Facility Primary Clarifier Improvements Project.
Move, Mr. President.
Second.
By legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. Next item.
Item number 15, referral 20-0220, amending contract with Reliance Staffing Systems, Inc., DBA Career Start to provide nursing services for Monroe County Department of Public Health in response to COVID-19.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 16, referral 20-0221, approving the conclusion of hazard pay due to greater risk of exposure or working extended hours due to the county's response to COVID-19 for certain classifications of Monroe County employees.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Delehanty, seconded by legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, what communication has gone out to the affected county employees regarding these changes?
Through the president, this is Andrew, the Human Resources Director. No communication has gone out yet. We did not want to assume any more action by the legislature. However, I do have an email group already set up for everybody who is currently receiving hazard pay who will be discontinued if you pass this, and they will be notified in tomorrow, so that will allow for as much time as possible for people to be aware.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration. Given what you just said, can you explain why I received several emails complaining that hazard pay was being taken away from county employees, by county employees?
Through the president, the only thing I could say is probably because the referral went before the legislature and it's public, people probably saw that, and when it went through the committee of the whole, people may have taken that as a formal passage, but I can't speak to anything past that.
All right, thank you. Just for your information, I did receive emails before the committee of the whole. Through the president to the administration, how and why are these changes being made?
The changes are being made just because in accordance with the CARES guidance, these are the group of people who are specifically mitigating COVID. So we feel that at this time, with all the phased reopenings at this point, these are the last group that should be left on the list.
Through the president to the administration as a follow-up. So this is part of the Department of the Treasury's couple of changes they've made since these were originally passed. They've come out with revised guidance twice, I believe.
Through you, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. Basically, our reason for doing this, there were a couple issues at play here. First and foremost, as the community started going through the different phases of the reopening, and there was some semblance of a return to normalcy, we decided that it was appropriate to, as we brought people back, we thought it was an appropriate time for hazard pay to end. And then in addition to that, as you know, as we talked about last month, the guidance from the Treasury Department has changed slightly. And again, as we said last month, we're very confident that we followed the guidance appropriately, and there will be reimbursement for everybody. But it was a combination of the evolving guidance and also the fact that everybody was returning back to work.
Thank you very much. That's it, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Legislator Bane.
Go ahead, Legislator Baines.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration. Has this decision been made in consultation with bargaining units, leadership?
Through you, Mr. President, we have had discussions with union leadership about this, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Any further?
Legislator Flagler Mitchell.
Go ahead, Legislator Flagler Mitchell. Go ahead, Legislator, you have the floor.
Thank you. This to you, to the administration. How many of the county employees who was receiving hazard pay are not receiving it now?
Through you, Mr. President, excuse me, Legislator, would you be able to repeat the question, please?
Yeah. I got an echo. Hold on.
You said how many of the people that were receiving hazard pay are now not receiving hazard pay?
Mr. President, if you could give us a moment, let us look through some records we have here, please.
Take your time.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have, I would answer the question as saying we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 employees originally, maybe a little bit north of that. Right now, with this revised proposal, we'll have approximately 200 employees who will still be receiving it.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us what departments are those? To you, Mr. President?
What departments that they're still receiving hazard pay, or what departments they got taken off of hazard pay? Legislator Flagler.
Say that again?
You want to know what departments the people are still on receiving hazard pay, or the people that were removed from hazard pay, what departments they were on?
The people who was removed. Do you, Mr. President?
Through the President, the departments that are remaining are MCH, DHS, and Public Health. The departments that are coming off are DES, Sheriff's Office, Board of Elections, Public Safety, and I think
Airport.
the airport. I believe.
I think that's it, it's Board of Elections.
Yes, I said Board of Elections. So I believe that is everyone.
Thank you. To you, Mr. President, to the administration, did you say the Sheriff's Department?
Through the President, that's correct.
This to you, Mr. President, administration. What is the reason of the shift of hazard pay for these different departments?
Through you, Mr. President, this is County Attorney John Bringwa. Consistent with the CARES Act guidance, the individuals that were selected to remain on the list are those that are still providing essentially and substantially dedicating their time to mitigating the public health crisis itself. So that are still directly working to mitigate that crisis. So as Ms. Guzetta said, that includes the Department of Public Health, the Monroe Community Hospital, as well as a limited number of social services employees. So that is the set that remains eligible for hazard pay.
And do you, Mr. President, is that because they're going to be dealing with the general public?
Yes, not even just through you, Mr. President. This is John Bringwa again. Yes, that they're dealing with the public and specifically dealing with people who may, in fact, have exposure to COVID, for example, or are working directly in a healthcare setting.
Okay, so just do you to the administration. So the Sheriff Department not going to have a high risk of dealing with the public?
Through you, Mr. President, the metric was whether they have increased an additional hazard beyond those of other employees. It's not, at this point, the standard wasn't just dealing with the public. It was whether they were actively working to mitigate the public health crisis as a primary function of their responsibilities. that's why the current stat is limited to employees more in the healthcare or social services space who are still substantially dedicating their duties to responding to COVID crisis.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, this is Legislator Zale.
Go ahead, Legislator Zale, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, I'm wondering if I heard something wrong, but Legislator Hebert had asked at the beginning if any communication had gone out regarding this, and the answer I heard was that it had not gone out, but that people just found out because of the committee of the whole. And then there was a follow-up to that that basically said that Legislator Bane had brought up about communication with the unions. So I'm wondering which one of those is accurate, and maybe as a follow-up, when that conversation started with anyone, unions or anybody else.
Legislator Zale, I would, through you, Mr. President, I would suggest that both of those statements were accurate and they're not mutually exclusive. We had discussions with the unions informing them that hazard pay in some form would be ending. We did not get into a detailed discussion about which titles it was. So those discussions, as a courtesy, we made them aware of it. And then we came before this body, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was an attachment attached with the referral that listed a line-by-line title of and department of who was receiving hazard pay. I'm pretty confident in asserting that both of the answers we gave to the questions were truthful and accurate.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I don't know why I heard it differently, but I appreciate that. Just as another question, and I apologize for maybe not asking this prior to the meeting, but with the removal of so many people that are currently receiving hazard pay, I think I asked this maybe a month ago or something, but it's just good for me to refresh my memory and kind of get an update. So I'm sorry, through the President, the administration, do we currently know how much of the $129 million CARES funding we have spent? And then hopefully I can do quick math to figure out how much is remaining. I didn't get Common Core, so I'm working on my math still.
Franklin County CFO. I don't have a number for the legislature tonight. It is a topic of several meetings we've had earlier today and earlier yesterday. So a dollar amount will be forthcoming relatively shortly, probably by the end of this week.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll look forward to receiving that. Thank you very much.
President Carbone, Legislator Boyce.
Go ahead, Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, to the administration. Can you tell me specifically at the Sheriff's Department, what union representative was told this was going to happen?
Point of order, Mr. President. What does that have to do with the bill at hand?
Oh, I think it's pertinent. They've answered 3 questions about unions, and it was okay. Now this one isn't. I think it's all relevant.
What you're asking for what the legislator is asking for is the name of an individual. I understand that communication, but I'm not exactly sure why someone's specific name who's in a private meeting is necessary for the legislator to know.
Okay, the administration can leave out the name. We'll leave the question, did you consult with the sheriff's union? Anyone in the sheriff's union specifically? You can leave the individual's name out of the answer.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. We lost the administration again. We have a little technical difficulty. I think we lost the administration again.
President, well, I respect your decision on this matter. Yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't, as legislators, lawmakers, not understand or not know who specifically they talk to. Because my understanding is that the sheriff's union is surprised that they're being taken off.
Legislator Boyce, I don't want to interrupt you, but could you just hold on 1 second while we get the administration back on the audio?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. McCann, do we have you back on the line?
Yes, we just got back on here, yep.
Our apologies. Do you want to restart
All right.
the stage?
So, I'm not sure where we stand in terms of the question.
Legislator Boyce, you want to pick up where you left off?
Yes, through the president to the administration, I had asked specifically who in the union at the sheriff's department you spoke to. Those people are elected to represent the sheriff's department as a whole, and I believe that as elected officials, we deserve the right to know who specifically you talk to, because I think they're going to be a little bit caught off guard on this.
And to my point of order, Mr. President, I believe you ruled that the administration did not need to give specifics in terms of the names of the people in the meeting, but rather that a meeting was held. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Okay. And let's keep the peace. Let's just say the administration, did you talk to a specific individual or individuals in the sheriff's union about this hazard pay thing?
Through you, Mr. President, Ms. Gazzetta will answer that question. But I guess in terms of the characterization of people being caught off guard, when this referral was introduced, there was a list of titles. So this has been in the public domain for probably about 3 or 4 weeks, I think. But I'll let Ms. Gazzetta answer the specific.
President. I have a ask out to the Labor Relations Manager, Scott Walsh, right now to find out who exactly he spoke with and if it was a conversation on phone or if it was an email. I am not the person who had the conversation with him, so I cannot definitively answer the question. I don't want to give you false information.
Thank you.
Mr. President, but it's our understanding those discussions.
Pardon? Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, I have no further questions other than the fact that I'm so, I'm ready to just not vote in favor of this at this time. I feel like we need to support the people that are very important to our community. I think that at this point, I would be inclined to vote no.
Any further discussion?
Mr. President,
none?
this is Legislator Zale. I do actually have one other question. If this legislation does pass through you, Mr. President, to the administration, let me rephrase. If this fails and we do not take individuals off of hazard pay, are we in violation in any way of the new guidelines that have been delivered to us?
Through you, Mr. President, this is County Attorney John Bringawat. If we did not, I would have a concern that some of the titles would not be eligible for CARES Act reimbursement.
So then, and thank you so much. That helps me a little bit. So then, going back to something that was said before, this truly is a combination then of what is in those guidelines, and then the county also making a determination that because we are at phase 4, it's the county making the determination that certain people should be off of hazard pay, and a combination of the both of those, correct? Through you, Mr. President, to the administration?
Through you, Mr. President, that's correct. A combination of the fact that we have returned many employees to work and the updated CARES Act guidance. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, okay, and one final question regarding this. One of the things that I was a little bit concerned about in the onset is that there didn't seem to be a threat matrix or anything that we could point to kind of say, all right, at this point, these people should receive hazard pay, and at this point, these people should, and I don't know, some sort of formula that's smarter than I'm aware of to come up with, who should be on what at what time. So fast forward now, here we are as a county making a determination that we have decided that certain people should no longer get hazard pay, as opposed to what the guidance says, because it's a combination of both, as per what you have said. So to sum up the question through you, to the administration, through the president, is there some sort of guiding document that just kind of allows us to see which people are no longer in a greater or a heightened sense of danger that might require hazard pay?
Through you, Mr. President, actually, we were able to go back to Legislator Boyce's question before I addressed Legislator Zale's question. We did speak to our labor relations person here at the county, and they did have verbal conversations with the union leadership in the Sheriff's Department. In terms of who doesn't have a threat or who does have a threat, the list is what the attachment is, the latest attachment. I'm not sure what letter that is. But I think also I would respond to that on some level. that's what the county executive gets elected for, and that's what the legislature gets elected for, to sort of set goals and make decisions on public policy issues like this. So I think, again, we're very comfortable with the decisions we've made in conjunction with our department heads and the operation that we had, and also in light of the changing guidance with that. So again, at the end of the day, we're comfortable with where we are with this.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. I guess, with all due respect, I trust you. I really honestly do. And I trust the leadership there. But I also recognize that there's people that are going to be saying, wait a second, I'm at this threshold, you're at this threshold. And I guess I'm wondering what it is that we're pointing at as a guiding document or something like that outside of the people who are, we're being told have to come off this hazard pay. What are we pointing at as a metric to kind of explain or to prove scientifically that the other people that the county is deciding should come off hazard pay should actually be off? I'm trying to protect, in a sense, individuals who may feel as though that they still are at risk and still should receive the hazard pay. I hope that makes sense. I mean it with respect, of course.
Sure. Through you, Mr. President, absolutely. I guess, we're the guidance that we've received and the evolving guidance that we've received has really been our what we've used to make these decisions. And I would also suggest that we have over 4,000 employees, and to come up with a system where at the end of the day, everybody's going to be happy and everybody's going to agree with every decision that we made isn't something I don't know that that's at all possible. And again, we use the guidance and we made the decisions we've made with the information we had and the criteria that was established by the Treasury Department.
Okay, thank you for the response. Appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, Legislator.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to table this referral, please.
Second, Mr. President.
Who seconded that? Legislator DeFlorio?
Legislator Boyce.
Oh, Legislator Boyce, I'm sorry. Okay, let's go to a roll call vote for
No
tabling.
discussion, Mr. President?
No discussion on a tabling motion, correct, Legislator Burrow?
That was my question.
Pardon?
That's my question.
There's a motion.
There's no debate on the motion.
There's no debate on a tabling motion.
Thank you. That's my question. Thank you.
Well, that's what I said, twice.
Me too.
Okay.
Mr. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Felder?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Alcoffer? Mr. Alcoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Alcoffer votes yes. Mr. Ansello?
Yes.
Mr. Ansello votes yes. Ms. Barnhart?
No.
Barnhart votes no. Mr. Braw?
Mr. Burrow?
Oh, no.
Baroth votes no. Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Baines votes no. Ms. Boyce?
Yes.
Ms. Boyce votes yes. Mr. Delehanty?
Yes.
Mr. Delehanty votes yes. Mrs. DeFlorio?
Yes.
Mr. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer?
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Flagler-Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Flagler-Mitchell votes yes. Ms. Hassman?
No.
Ms. Hassman votes no. Mr. Hebert?
Yes.
Mr. Hebert votes yes. Mr. Keofet-Lacy?
Yes.
Mr. Keofet-Lacy votes yes. Ms. Lamar?
Yes.
Ms. Lamar votes yes. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Mr. Mafucci?
No.
Mr. Mafucci votes no. Mr. Marionetti?
Yes.
Mr. Marionetti votes yes. Mr. Morelli?
No.
Mr. Morelli votes no. Ms. Roman?
No.
Ms. Roman votes no. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor votes yes. Mr. Terp?
Yes.
Mr. Terp votes yes. Mr. Wilcox?
No.
Mr. Wilcox votes no. Mr. Wilt?
Yes.
Mr. Wilt votes yes. Mr. Udelson?
No.
Mr. Udelson votes no. Mr. Zale?
Yes.
Mr. Zale votes yes. President Carbone?
Yes.
President Carbone votes yes. 20-9, motion to table is adopted.
Go to the next item.
Item number 17, referral 20-0222, confirmation of appointment to the 911 Operating Practices Board.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by
Second,
legislator
Mr.
Alcoffer,
President.
seconded by legislator Boyce. Is there any discussion?
This is Legislator Barworth.
Yes, legislator Barrow.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, do we know the date of the next scheduled 911 Operating Practice Board?
I believe it's the first week in August.
First week in August, I can answer that question for you, legislator Barrow.
Thank you. And to the president then, is that before, that would be before then our next scheduled legislative meeting, correct?
Yes, that's why I considered it a matter of urgency before you even ask it. How did I know that, right?
Well, no, I was going to say that was why too. Yes, I was going, that's where exactly where I was going. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 18, referral 20-0223, approving Monroe County Community College's 2020 to 2021 operating budget.
Move it, Mr. President. Second.
Moved by legislator Turk, seconded by legislator Delehanty. This is for introductory purposes only. Next item.
Item number 19, referral 20-0223, providing that resolution entitled approving Monroe County Community College's 2020 to 2021 operating budget be tabled.
Move it, Mr. President. Second.
Moved by legislator Turk, seconded by legislator Delehanty. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 20, referral 20-0223, fixing public hearing for approving Monroe Community College's 2020 to 2021 operating budget.
Move it, Mr. President. Second.
Moved by legislator Turp, seconded by legislator Delehanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes.
one quick question. I'm assuming that the public hearing is being scheduled on a date of one of the committee meetings, correct?
Could you repeat that question, please?
The public hearing scheduled for Thursday, July 30th at 5:36 p.m. That's at one of the scheduled committee meetings, correct?
That's the date of the committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you, because we are, then we are going to be using a committee of the whole next month then, well, in July.
30th, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thursday.
Okay.
You're welcome. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Jack,
Next item.
next item.
Oh, you didn't ask for any opposed.
Oh, yeah, that's correct. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item. I'm sorry.
Item number 21, referral 20-0224, amending resolution 275 of 2019, standard workday and reporting resolution for county elected and appointed officials for retirement credit purposes.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Delehanty, seconded by legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion on this referral? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. There being no unfinished business, Legislator Brew.
This honorable body stands adjourned. Our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, August 11th at 6 p.m.
Meeting adjourned.